Founded in 1999 by Jason Burks, Retrospec Films is Oklahoma's largest turnkey production company of its kind. With over 2 decades of experience, a full-time team of over 20 talented individuals, a 12,000 square foot studio to create in, and thousands of successfully completed projects in both entertainment and advertising. You're in the right place if you like hearing some good old filmmaking stories. On this podcast, we will discuss the pursuit of creating things and the problems we solve by digging up projects from across the last 20 years and giving you a glimpse behind the scenes where the magic happens. You're listening to Retrospec Films from the archives.
That was on purpose. All right, here we go. Hello, and thanks for joining us on Retrospec from the archives, where we discuss the pursuit of creating things as well as the problems we solve in that process. And today, I am hanging out with Cole per year.
Yeah, you got it.
Everyone gets one Cole per year. And then we've got Tacketown Tacos.
Hello.
Also known as, what's your first name?
I don't even remember at this point.
Do you have a middle name?
Christian.
Christian.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
You mean all this time I never knew that?
Yeah.
So Christian Tackett. That's weird.
Yeah.
That is. Can you just change it to tacos?
Yeah.
I could. If would that just make you feel better?
It would be great.
Okay.
Honestly, it would.
So today we are going to be talking more about the Oklahoma tourism project that we got to work on with VI. We were so excited that they hired us to partner alongside them and help out with the production and then some of the elements of post-production. So the elements of post-production they were doing all the editing in-house, all the music in-house, and we were just going to help with the visual effects and a little bit of the color grading, which is exactly what we did. This project was very unique in that these conversations happened early in the project because we knew the cameras we shot on, the formats we shot on, the lenses we shot on, the way the cinematography happened. All of these different elements were going to make an impact on the post-production. So the main aspect when I talk about visual effects is this area called the portal. So in the commercials, every single commercial, there's 6 of them, had a moment in which you would leave the mundane and you would go into the amazing experience that happens in Oklahoma. And in that little moment, that little one frame intersection, you leave one shot and you enter another, and you're trying to do it in a very clever fashion that feels natural for the audience, and it feels smooth, and it's not jarring, and the speed is right, and the geometry is right, and everything is correct. So when you watch these spots, you'll see these moments that happen. They're very fast. It's like you're in one shot, bam, you're in something else. And the hope was that how could we take the audience through that in a way that felt very natural? So when we scouted every location that was in mind, we looked at everything and looked at the geometry and asked ourselves, will the geometry map out? Will the camera push through? What's the speed of the camera? What's the element that gets rotoscoped? What is the actual portal shot? What is the part? How do we go through it? And as we went through the scripts that had been approved a year ahead of time by the state of Oklahoma, we had to identify solutions differently for every single commercial. It was like, oh, this one's easy. We go into a birdhouse. Still not easy, but this one's easy-ish. We know we're gonna go
Ironically, one of the hardest ones to do.
I know. We're gonna go into the hole of a birdhouse, and we're gonna come out a hole of a slide, and that's gonna be easy. Yes, shooting it though was not easy, and the post was even more difficult. I think I'm gonna hand off maybe first to you, Tackett. I'd like to kind of get some of your thoughts. And I don't remember when we had like the first check-in convo. I don't even remember if it was after we shot. It might have been after we shot, where it's like, okay, here's the objective, 6 commercials, 2 shots per commercial, connect the 2, here's the way they should connect, here's how I shot it, here's how I see it happening. But kind of give me your thoughts on those initial like onboarding moments.
Yeah, we pretty much came in as a post-production team after the edit was locked by VI. So they had the edits locked and sent us Premiere files and stuff. And so we had all the footage and everything, but we, relinked it on our server and stuff and, basically popped it open and kind of met together and looked through all the spots. And it's like, okay, here's what we have. What do we do with this? How do we make this, more exceptional, basically, more interesting, more fun, more magical. And that was kind of the charge that we had. So, like you said, the portals were pretty much the biggest part of what we were trying to transform. And so obviously the cinematography was there, which was guiding what we were going to do, but we had to take that cinematography and either make it work or make it, enhance what was already there, depending on the shot. And the crazy part was was there 6 spots, I think? 5 or 6?
6.
So in all 6 spots, it was a different effect. And even though when you watch them at the end, they look similar and they look cohesive, the way that we got to that point was not the same way. And so we kind of had to reinvent the wheel on each spot, just because the nature of, in one spot where, like you said, we're going inside to a birdhouse, and so you've got this like circular, almost like a circle wipe effect, but not really, a little more complex than that, and then coming out the slide. And then whereas another one, you're going into a little girl's princess castle and coming out a real castle. And so those things don't look the same, and so you have to treat them differently to make the effect kind of come to life in the same way. And so, just kind of basically creatively kind of solving, like you said in the intro, it's like, how do we make a solution for this? Even though it was already thought through and meticulously planned out, we still had to be kind of innovative in the way to make it happen.
There was a lot of back and forth too, because I remember like some of the transitions that we did, like we would get through the transition, be done with it, be looking at it, be like, this isn't it. Like we need to completely go back and like restart and like reinvent like how we do the transition. Like we need to either wipe a certain way or we need to rotoscope something else to like, we need to bring it in a completely different way than how it was intended, because it doesn't look as good as we thought it would. So we had to go back in and like reinvent the whole spot, basically.
I mean, you're looking at it and you're like, does this work or not?
Yeah.
And you pretty much know. Everybody in the room is like, no, this isn't working. So let's try something different.
It took like almost getting to the end a couple times to see that though, before it's like, this isn't working. We got to go back and we got to change something. And
And like I was saying, on the Princess Castle shot, the way we made that happen to the one where there was the guy drawing, that was completely different.
Yeah, night and day.
Cole, you did a lot on that transition. I mean, it was entirely different. So you were doing a rotoscoping drawing effect where you were tracking stuff, and super different.
Yeah, that was one of them that was like, I have to restart. Like, this isn't looking good. Like, I literally went through and like, oh, we want to bring the color onto this drawing. I'll just bring it into Photoshop and I'll just spend the whole day painting everything in. And then like as soon as I got it in there, I was like, this looks awful. It's like, this doesn't look good at all. So we ended up just taking the actual shot and like rotoscoping it on top of the picture and like making it match, and it looked so much better. But that was like one of those things where it's like, you're not gonna know if it looks good like until you do it.
Yeah.
So.
And it's kind of like just the process of trial and error. And, you have all these tool sets that you can use, and you think, okay, am I going to use rotoscoping? Am I going to use tracking, transitional effects, warps? What is going to work here? And sometimes you have to just throw different tools at the, the problem and find out which one is going to actually solve it.
Yeah. Well, I think really the joy or the interest of this conversation is like very much in the details. And I thought it would be kind of fun if we can do it. We probably have about 10 minutes left, but to dig into each one of them. You guys have kind of dabbled on little pieces of it. So I'll set us up, and then why don't we just like walk through each one and talk a little bit about it. So, I will say one thing I learned. It's funny because the easiest one from my perspective was birthday. Would you guys agree? Probably.
I would think so.
And birthday was the one that I matched the cinematography the best. Which is,
thank you.
I know, right? And it's tricky though, because like in this kind of spot, there was so much geometry, there was so much timing, there was so much camera height, matching lens focus, aperture, all that crap to get it to really be smooth. Now, another thing to take note when you watch some of this stuff is we weren't trying to make this super dramatic, magical transition that was like, oh my gosh, we just went to like, to Disneyland or something. We wanted the transition to be fluid, and we wanted it to almost be unnoticeable, but with a hint of magic. And so if we were able to do just a very minimal amount, but it accomplished those goals, great. Sometimes we had to do a whole lot more to accomplish that because the cinematography was more complex and the transition was harder. So Tackett, talk to me just a little bit about Birthday Party. That one's pretty simple. I believe the shot comes in and then the shot goes out.
Yeah. That one was basically essentially a match cut. So like you said, the way you shot it was that the lady was blowing out candle on the cake, and then in the next shot, she was she was alone without her friends on Skype, or whatever, Zoom these days.
She was on Zoom.
Yeah, that dates me.
Skype.
And then in the next shot, she's blowing out the candle and her friends all around her. So you matched the shot, and so all we had to do was kind of reframe it and match it as best as we could. And then what we did to kind of add the magic was we added a particle simulation on top of the flame, and I think we even enhanced the flame to match it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, I mean, there's people that aren't even in this room right now that helped on it. We had, I think, 5 or 6 different people that all worked on it. It was me, Cole, Chris, Ben, Adam. As far as post-production goes.
Yeah.
And so
that's also a whole nother layer to it, because like when we started working on it, it was like right before Christmas break. So we all took drives home, and we were all working on it from home. And then I think I got sick, and then I don't know if you got sick like right after.
Yeah, we went through a bout of
we had to have like spreadsheets of like where each spot was and like who was working on it.
Yeah.
And it was like
the organization was a big part of it, and I think that's kind of a make or break, because like you said, I mean, if you're trying one thing and then you send it to the client and they like that, you have to make sure that makes it into all the other versions of the spot.
Yeah.
And when you've done 5 different versions, that's when it starts getting complex.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, on the birthday one, it was pretty much as simple as that. It was a match cut with a little bit of a particle simulation and obviously the color grade to make everything look amazing.
That one thing that was funny is that candle. I remember that in the second shot, the candle was actually blown out before the part of the shot we wanted to use. And I don't remember, it wasn't either one of you that put
I think it was Chris that did that.
I think it was Chris. And I remember that was one of the things, was like, how can we, like, I wish the candle was still burning. And for some reason, I was hung up on that. Of all the things I was hung up on. And I asked Chris, and like an hour later, he's like, here you go. And I watched it, and I was like, it looks perfect. It looks completely real. I was so glad, because I was like, oh, that's just icing on the cake. But that one was simple. So, all right, so we talked about that
icing on
one.
the literal cake.
It was, you're right.
Yeah.
It was icing on the cake. It was a candle on the cake. All right, so next to that, let's see. I'll just pick at random. Why don't we talk about the airplane? That one was fun.
We both looked at each other like, oh no.
So the airplane one, you've got a little boy, he holds up an airplane. As he holds it up, then we match cut to that airplane being held up in a completely different space at the Stafford Museum, and then he flies it around. This one was tricky because we did also have a little bit of a sky enhancement going on. And I was on a gimbal, and the camera is moving on a giant circle axis, so the background is 180-degree view almost. And we also couldn't figure out how would we transition. Like, would we cut the plane out? Would we build a 3D model of a plane to have a morph zone? Like, trying to get a 5-year-old kid to hold a plane in the exact perfect angle in 2 totally different scenes that were shot a month apart was very difficult, and we didn't get it, so we did the best we can. Or could, but I don't know who wants to take. You both worked on that one a lot.
I'll start because I started on it, and I think you did the transition that actually stayed.
I mean, we juggled it.
So actually, Chris started on the shot,
Yep.
and he did essentially like a morph, like
Yep.
you were talking about. And I don't know where in the communications, but that got cut at some point. So it was like basically the plane morphing into the other plane.
Yep.
And it was too obvious.
We tried a white dip. We tried a lot of things.
Well, it's because he was holding it at an angle on the
it was
second
just-
shot. It was just
enough
like
different.
an inch.
The parallax
off.
was off.
So because it was like just barely off, it would look weird.
Yep.
So we tried that. We tried a couple other things, but then Cole, I think you ended up kind of coming up with the solution, which was one of those type of like a warp transition.
Yeah, it was almost
How would
like
you describe it?
It was like almost like an iris wipe, almost. I was like, oh, it worked. You transition the shot, you see the plane.
Yep. It had kind of this, I think they described it as like an energy pulse or something like that. And it kind of had that because it gave you that, like the world changed.
Mm-hmm.
And even though that's like a pretty simple effect to execute, it just worked.
Yeah.
I mean,
the other effect was way harder, took way longer, and it didn't work.
Yeah, and the other thing with that one is because we had to motion track it and cut out elements and keep them in place while the camera's moving, I felt like that one was a bit of a bear. I mean, when you watch it, it's like the outcome is smooth, simple, and perfect.
Yeah, when you watch it, I don't think it's like, oh, yeah, that effect, like, that maybe took a day.
That took someone a week and a half.
No, it's it took so long because there was so much trial and error with
Right.
that shot.
Yeah.
But if we would have started like knowing exactly what we wanted going into that shot,
Yeah.
probably would have took an A.
Yeah.
But
There's
Yep.
no handbook in this job.
No handbook. Everything's custom. All right, so let's move on. Let's talk about the castle one. I think the castle was pretty simple. That's the one that I injured my trap on. It still hurts. I'm not mad at anybody. It's fine.
On
Well,
which
I
one?
wasn't part of it.
The
The
first or the second?
castle one. It was a little girl in the living room.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was holding the camera so low because I wanted the camera angle to like coast through the living room and all the toys and stuff. And so, you know, it weighed 41 pounds. And so holding 41 pounds out in front of you like that, low to the ground. And like we did like 20 something takes, and it was like take 18, and all of a sudden something happened in my right trap, and I was like, uh-oh. And I was like, God be with me. I have to get the take.
Oh
But
my gosh.
it's all right. We got it. So that one.
I think I injured my finger when I was working on it too.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. What is wrong
my
with this?
eyes kind of were burning.
Oh man, I feel
Yeah.
bad for you guys. Workers comp. So that one, the goal was just for me, I just wanted to line up like the tent doors with the castle doors and hopefully find some happy space in between these two linear objects that close to a flat gap that open and close to work. And I think, we did try a lot of stuff, but I think in the end, it really did come back to that simplicity. But why don't you start on that one, Taggart?
Yeah, it kind of landed at a kind of a match cut
Yep.
with the tricky part that we kind of navigated on this one was when she opens the like soft, it's not even a door, it's like
tent curtains.
Yeah,
Yep.
the curtains of her tent.
Yep.
It's do we go bright or do we go dark?
Yeah.
Because the inside of the castle that she comes out
dark.
of is dark, whereas like the room in the living room is very bright.
Bright.
So that was the thing we kind of went back and forth on. We ended up, it was actually about the edit itself, like shaving off different parts of the first shot and the second shot to kind of find what is the most natural feeling and what like seems smooth to your eye. And that's really all it came down to. And we added obviously like particles and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's kind of what ended up being the solution.
I think color was maybe the hardest thing on that one.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, that one was like the hardest one for us to get the color right.
Desaturating the first shot properly. We added some false luminance into the dark castle, some things like that.
Yeah.
I would say that was a frame by frame one. And it's funny because there's only been so many times in my career where like one frame or two frames was the difference between it feeling right or wrong. All of these spots had that. Like one extra frame, it didn't feel right.
And it's weird to think that we spent, the amount of time that we spent on not even the edit, not the sound, just the visual effects and color on 30-second spots.
Oh, yeah.
6 of them, but still like 3 minutes of content.
Oh, yeah.
And, the amount of quantity that we will put out in the same amount of time, it's just because the detail level that's required to execute something at that level takes the same amount of time as we would normally do a bunch of, 5-minute videos or whatever it is.
It's true. All right, let's move on past Castle. Let's talk about Birdhouse. I brought that up a little earlier. So Birdhouse, the objective was move into a hole of a birdhouse and pull out of a girl coming out of a slide. This one was actually really hard. There's a lot of tricky things about how high up in the slide is the girl, what particles chase her, how far into the birdhouse do we get, at what point do we pick up the rotoscope and transition. Cole, why don't you talk about this one, because you worked on this one a lot.
Yeah. I like this one though. This is my jam. This is my rotoscoping time to shine. The actual, transition from the birdhouse to the girl wasn't really. There was just a lot of rotoscoping, a lot of blurs. Took forever to process or render anything. Because I remember when you were looking at it, it's like, oh, well, we're rendering out the first scene, and then it stops, and then it just waits for 2 hours. Like, oh, yeah, that's the rotoscope and all the blurs that I have on there to get through everything. But the real kicker was trying to, because we were doing like another sky enhancement, adding like flares and fixing the color of the sky. So we had to like rotoscope out the entire like scenery.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like pushing out of like the slide. So like the mask had to come in at a different time, and we had to like rotoscope every slide, every, tower, and had to like make it look natural. Like I remember like there was like a debate on like one of the towers. It's like, is that like a solid piece, or is that netting?
Transparent?
Is it transparent? Is it netting? What is it? Like
we had to go back out there and take photos of it.
So it was just a lot of just like fine tune like rotoscoping that just when you look at it, it's like, oh yeah, that doesn't look that hard. It's a lot of time to go into it. It's like I have to make sure every single pixel looks correct. So I have
Yep.
to go in and like fine tune every single detail. And it's like,
And we actually had a weird thing happen where the way we were processing the effect was another zoom effect, but because he had so
I
many
forgot about
effects
that.
processed in there, when we did the zoom, it was actually crashing After Effects, and so we figured out that
Adobe.
if we basically what we did is we rendered out one frame in 1080, even though we were processing in 4K, we rendered out a single frame, put that on top of that one frame that was crashing. And that was able to get us through the render. And it's in the middle of the blur where everything's blurry.
Oh, wow.
So you don't even know it's in 1080.
well, I remember at one point we had to go through like, what was like the autosave or something?
Yeah.
And we just took like the preview file.
That's what it was. Yeah, it was really weird. I had to do some weird stuff to just get that to not crash the computer because the
Yeah.
8K
totally
footage was just not having it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we were testing the limits of After Effects.
We
but
were.
We were pushing it to the max for sure.
All right, so on to the fifth one. Let's talk about the drink. Now, that one was, I would say actually, thank God, worked out pretty good. That one was like birthday for me. When I shot that again, the concept was push into an element and then hopefully pull out of an element. And we pushed through a living room with a dog running through the shot and kids and dad running down the staircase and mom grabbing her coffee and swiping it across the screen. And the objective was that coffee mug would almost take up the full linear space of the frame. And then somewhere in the middle, when the camera's right about to run into it, I transition it to her grabbing a margarita instead, and the camera pulls out to reveal that she's sitting at a pool in front of a gigantic resort, and it looks beautiful. That was the goal. And, I was a little scared about that one.
I think that was one of the ones that turned out probably the best.
It turned out great, and thank God, it really did, because one thing I was thinking about, and I don't know if you guys knew this, maybe you did, maybe you don't care, you're like, whatever. Jason's crazy, we'll just let him do it. But was the timing of the speed, because I knew that if I, pushed the camera in like that and then pulled out faster like that would feel weird. Or if I went that would feel weird. And so I was counting in my head because a lot of times you mark the ground and measure and have a stopwatch and a laser and all this other crap, but we never had time to do that. So I was just like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I was
on different days.
On different days, and so I was
He
trying.
just never stopped counting.
I just never stopped counting. So when people would walk up to me and I just they're talking to me and I'm doing this, they're like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Oh, trust me, there's something wrong." But that one I think turned out really editorially. Worked out really well. That one was funny too. Aren't you the one who ended up putting the slice on the first shot?
That little slice.
That was hilarious. So there was talk about that blending a little bit. I don't remember if it was a lime or was it an orange.
It was a lime.
It was a lime.
That was a whole debate because at one
tell.
point they're like, it goes from an orange to a lime, and it was just a whole color thing that we were something got
we weren't
messed
paying a
up
ton of
and-
attention to it because it was that big and a shot that big.
So we had to make the lime look like a lime again at one point.
Yeah. But what was that? That one,
You can't mess up your citruses.
I know.
You can't. I mean, we added the lime to a couple frames of the coffee cup.
Yeah, that was just more trying to naturally blend it in, a few frames early, as much as possible, so it's not as jarring if it's just just a hard jump cut.
Right.
So we brought a few elements in from the margarita, maybe 5 or 6 frames early. So it's oh, okay, well you can see the scene starting to slowly fade out, and then boom, full margarita particles. I don't remember. Did we have particles in the first part of it? I don't remember.
I think it was the same thing. We kind of ramped them in.
Yeah.
And that was really the key with all of these was bringing something of the next shot into the first shot, or vice versa, bringing the first shot into the second shot, and
Just
it
a
tricks your
sprinkling.
eye. Yeah,
A sprinkling.
or it doesn't trick your eye. It makes it more comfortable.
Yeah,
or
it blends
smooth.
it.
Right.
It's
It gives you a little bit of time to prepare for.
Right. You're like, oh, something's gonna happen. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
All right, last one, and then we'll wrap up this episode. So the last one, the motorcycles. Probably one of the hardest ones. And I will say that this one was a struggle from the get-go because the location that we were supposed to use actually ended up getting vetoed because of legalities, so we couldn't shoot at it. So then when we changed where we were shooting the guys, it sort of changed a lot of the artistic elements that made this whole transition work. We've got the guys in the room. They're writing on the journal. The book was going to come up to look at it, and it was going to drop out and reveal behind it this really cool wall. And that kind of got killed. And so then we had a different wall, and then I had the motorcycles in it when they were supposed to be behind me. So a lot of things changed that really I didn't even tell you guys about, where I had already shot this portal on my iPhone, and it was awesome. I loved it. But then that location changed, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is different. I don't know if this is going to work. So this one was probably, in my opinion, the hardest. It was the hardest for me because I couldn't figure out what we were going to do, even after we shot all of it. In fact, I was so certain that the way we shot, the transition shot, was incorrect because the artwork in the journal was wrong, that I went back after the shoot was over and reshot that shot.
Oh my God.
Because I was like, the artwork was incorrect because it had changed, and now we shot there. We knew what we needed, so we went back and did it all over again, which I'm glad we did because that's what we used. But you worked on this one a ton. I can't remember. Did you work on this one some?
A little bit.
A little bit. Talk about this one, Cole, because this one, like, let's just talk about, I guess, maybe where it ended up, the final.
Yeah, I remember like the first part. I think Chris started this one.
Yeah, he did.
I think what was the original intention? It was just going to zoom into.
It was going to be like a bit of a match cut dissolve to that wall, but the problem was that the A of the second shot wasn't close enough on the wall to really do that.
Gotcha.
So it just didn't work.
Yeah, and I think Chris found a clip that was a really great solution where they're holding the book and then, you do the push and they just ended the shot naturally, so we took it down.
Right, and then it was like, oh, it's kind of there.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, well, that's it. We'll just take it.
Yeah.
That's the shot. So we took that and then we just threw the book down and then boom, there's the wall.
Yep.
So the tricky part from that was how do we bring in those other elements from the second shot into the first one
to help the mind
right
smooth out the transition.
So originally it was like, oh, well, we'll just throw a few colors down there, whatever. And then we're like, no, let's take it a step further. Let's make it match. So I went through, like I said earlier, I went into Photoshop, spent a whole day coloring the entire image.
Like a kid with a coloring book.
Like a small child in fourth grade. I took my crayons and colored it all in. And then we put it in, and I kind of knew, like, when I finished, like, it's not, like, the best. Like, I'm not the best artist in the world, so it didn't look, like, fantastic. But it was good. I was like, oh, I'll see what everyone else thinks about that. And it very quickly did not get approved. So we're like, okay, well, how else are we going to bring it in? So we're like, okay, well, let's take the actual image of the wall and see if we can, like, match it to this drawing that we had.
Motion track it, glue it.
Yeah, and
warp it a little bit.
Rotoscope it.
Which was actually VI helped a lot on the creative on that one. They sent us a Photoshop.
When they sent those Photoshop images,
that was huge.
That works.
Yeah, I was like, because it looked amazing when they sent that, and I was like, yeah, they want this to look a lot better, Cole, than your hand drawing. Take a look at this.
But that was huge because it's like, okay, well, they already have, like, the template for us. I just need to make sure
it happen in
make
motion.
it match.
Right. Yeah.
So that was maybe once it got to that point, it was like, oh yeah, it was super easy because all I have to do is basically just mask out the real image and just, like, kind of fade it on.
Yeah.
And then motion track it and then take it off. Taking it off was the hardest part because then the motion track just couldn't figure out what to do. So I just kind of slowly faded it off at that point because, like,
that's the funny thing about if a track is breaking, it's like, okay, fade out, fade out.
Yeah.
And then the funny thing is that after we solved that, we had to do all of them vertical, and that was one of the ones where it was in an entirely different shot.
Whole another shot, yeah.
And we had to have a different solution. It was similar, but not the same at all. And so we, like, had to rethink and come up with a different solution for the vertical. So
that's
if
right.
you're watching it on the gram,
we didn't have the same shot.
It was a different shot.
It was a challenge with the verticals, like taking something that we're like, oh, we solved it, we did it, and they're like, yeah, we need a vertical of that.
Yeah.
We need you to solve it again.
Different files.
It's like you're in math class. It's like, that equation's great, but you didn't show your work. So go back and do it again.
Yeah, I mean, the vertical is like, without taking too long on it, but, we live in a world now where half the world's looking at their stuff on a phone holding like this. So even when we shot this, it was kind of a comedy between me and the creative director because I'd shoot it and she's like, okay, what about the verticals? And I was like, oh, the verticals. Because I've been living in this 16:9 world and now I got to try to live in a 9:16 world. But the same thing happened in post. It was a whole nother set of edits. They were all in that vertical space. And so we redid a good majority, if not all, of the transitions as well in that space. But, more problems to solve. And quite frankly, that's what we all enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So Well, guys, I appreciate you taking the time to talk about this project. It was an amazing project. Hope those watching this watch those spots. I'm sure we'll probably play them in it, so I'm probably just saying that for no reason. If you enjoyed the podcast today, feel free to check out more of our podcasts. We've got them on our website, retrospecfilms.com. They're also on Spotify, on Apple, and a couple different places. We have them on social media. So we appreciate you guys taking the time to watch it, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Retrospec from the Archives. Peace.
Have a good one.
Later.